I perch on the edge of my parents' mahogany dining chair, the antique wood cold beneath my fingertips despite the room's suffocating warmth. The black dress I'm wearing, a splurge I couldn't really afford, feels like armor I desperately need tonight, each thread woven with the hope that maybe this time they'll see me. Around me, crystal goblets catch the chandelier's fractured light as Father pours wine that probably costs more than my monthly grocery budget, the burgundy liquid swirling hypnotically in a glass that's likely worth more than my entire outfit. The dining room stretches before me like a stage set for a play I've never been cast in. Persian rugs that have been in our family for generations cushion footsteps I'll never hear directed toward me. Oil paintings of ancestors I'll never live up to watch from gilded frames with eyes that seem to follow my every movement, silently judging my presence in their sacred space. The air itself feels heavy with expectation, not of my participation, but of my invisibility, a role I've perfected over 3 decades of practice. To Samantha's incredible achievement, Father's voice booms across the imported linen tablecloth, his words carrying the weight of paternal pride I've rarely experienced directed at me. The youngest attorney in Morrison & Associates' 50-year history, to secure a victory of this magnitude. His chest swells with satisfaction, the expensive tailored suit stretching across shoulders that have never carried the burden of my disappointments. Mother's perfectly manicured hand reaches across the table to squeeze Sam's equally perfect fingers, her diamond rings catching light that seems to avoid me entirely. "We always knew you were destined for greatness, darling," Mother adds, her voice carrying that particular timbre reserved for Sam's accomplishments, a mixture of awe and expectation that suggests greatness was never a possibility for me, but merely Sam's birthright. Sam practically glows under their attention, her professionally highlighted blonde hair, catching the candlelight like spun gold as she executes the perfect modest bow, eyes lowered just enough to appear humble while ensuring everyone can still admire her carefully applied makeup. The candlelight creates a halo effect around her head that would be comical if it weren't so perfectly symbolic of how our parents view her. She's mastered the art of appearing gracious while accepting praise, a skill I've never developed because opportunities to practice have been so rare. I take a small sip of water, the ice cubes clinking against crystal with a sound that seems to echo my insignificance. My throat feels dry, not from thirst, but from the familiar tightness that accompanies these family gatherings where I become a supporting character in my own life story. The water tastes of minerals and disappointment, though perhaps that's just my imagination coloring reality with the palette of my emotions. The article I read about the case mentioned how effectively you connected with the jury, I venture, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm grasping at conversational straws, trying to participate in a celebration that feels like it's happening in a different dimension from the one I inhabit. That emotional intelligence is so valuable in... My words evaporate like morning dew as Father interrupts, not even glancing in my direction. His attention remains fixed on Sam as if I'm merely background noise, an annoying hum that can be safely ignored. "Did you tell them about Judge Morrison's comments afterward?" he asks, his excitement palpable. "About how your closing argument was the most compelling he'd heard in his 30 years on the bench." The conversation flows around me like water around a stone, present but meaningless, touching but not penetrating. I focus on my breathing, counting each inhale and exhale the way my therapist taught me, grounding myself in the physical reality of oxygen entering and leaving my body. The weight of the fork in my hand becomes an anchor, its silver surface reflecting my distorted image back at me, elongated and unrecognizable, much like how I feel in this family dynamic. "Kylie, pass the potatoes?" Mother's voice cuts through my meditation. The first time she's addressed me directly in what feels like hours but has probably been 20 minutes. 20 minutes of invisibility in my own family home. 20 minutes of watching the Samantha show with front row seats but no speaking roles. I comply wordlessly, handing her the heirloom serving dish that's been in our family for 3 generations, though I suspect it will skip me and go directly to Sam when the time comes for inheritance. The dish feels heavy with history and unspoken expectations, its porcelain surface smooth from decades of hands that have never included mine in any meaningful way. "I've been working on a new compliance system at my office." I try again, my voice shaking slightly but determined to be heard. "I actually helped design the framework that my department is implementing across 3 states. Did I mention that Sam's firm is considering her for junior partner?" Mother cuts in seamlessly, her voice lifting with pride that should warm me but instead chills me to the bone. At 32, can you imagine? They typically don't promote anyone under 35. My throat tightens involuntarily. I'm 29, 3 years younger than my brilliant sister. But somehow in their eyes, I'm decades behind. Not just professionally, but fundamentally. As if I were born with some essential deficiency that no amount of effort could overcome. The age difference that should work in my favor somehow becomes another mark against me. Proof that I haven't achieved enough, haven't become enough, haven't transformed myself into someone worthy of their pride. Mother turns to me suddenly with that particular expression, the one that precedes her helpful suggestions about how I might improve my life. As if living it for 29 years hasn't given me some insight into its challenges and opportunities. You know, if you'd finished that MBA instead of just your bachelor's degree, you might be further along by now, she says, her tone carrying the gentle condescension of someone who believes they're offering wisdom rather than criticism. Sam completed her advanced degree while working full-time. It can be done with proper dedication. The MBA I've postponed 3 times flashes through my mind like a recurring nightmare. The acceptance letter sits in my desk drawer at home, its edges worn from the number of times I've taken it out to caress the university's embossed seal before folding it away again. Each postponement came with their tearful phone calls about financial crises, medical emergencies, business setbacks that required immediate attention, and, inevitably, monetary support. The degree that's been sitting in my someday file while my savings account hemorrhages money month after month. Each transfer a small death of my own dreams. I am doing fine. I manage, though the word tastes like ash in my mouth. My position is actually quite... Fine isn't exceptional, though, is it? Mother interrupts, setting down her fork with surgical precision. The sound of silver against porcelain rings through the dining room like a judge's gavel. Honestly, Kylie, you're not even half the woman your sister is. The dining room goes silent. Even the antique clock on the mantelpiece seems to pause its relentless ticking, as if the entire house recognizes the magnitude of what's just been spoken aloud. My hand trembles around the water glass, creating tiny ripples on the surface that mirror the waves of shock crashing through my body. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel heat crawling up my neck like a living thing seeking escape from the prison of my skin. The words slam into me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and replacing it with something sharp and jagged that catches in my throat. In that suspended moment, something fundamental shifts inside me, a tectonic movement of the soul that changes the landscape of who I am and who I will become. The clock resumes its steady rhythm, tick, 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 measuring the seconds of a life that suddenly feels borrowed rather than owned. 4 years of silence. 4 years of sacrifice. 4 years of making myself small enough to fit into the box they built for me. 4 years of believing that if I just gave enough, if I just supported enough, if I just disappeared enough, maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me. Then let her pay the mortgage for this house, I say quietly, the words emerging from some deep place I didn't know existed within me. Father's fork clatters against his plate with a sound that seems to echo through the house's very foundation. Mortgage? What mortgage? His voice carries the first tremor I've ever heard in it, the confident facade cracking like ice under spring's first warmth. Sam's champagne glass freezes halfway to her lips, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to dawning uncertainty. She looks between our parents and me as if watching a tennis match where the rules have suddenly changed mid-game. Kylie, this is hardly dinner conversation. Mother's voice carries a sharp edge of panic beneath its carefully composed surface. Who wants dessert? I made your favorite apple tart from scratch. No. The strength in my voice surprises even me. Though it shouldn't, this moment has been building for 4 years. Each payment a brick in the wall of my eventual rebellion. I pull my phone from my purse, fingers trembling as I open my banking app with the practiced efficiency of someone who has checked it obsessively for years. What are you talking about? Father's bluster lacks its usual conviction. He's looking at Mother now, seeking guidance or perhaps warning. But she's focused on me with an intensity that could bore holes through steel. I scroll through my transaction history, finding the first payment from 4 years ago, a date I know by heart because it was the night everything changed. February 15th, 2021, $2,500 to prevent foreclosure. Just this once, you said. Mom stands abruptly, the sudden movement causing her chair to scrape against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. I'm getting dessert. March, April, May, I continue, scrolling through the evidence of my complicity in my own erasure. Every month for 4 years, between $1,200 and $2,400, depending on what crisis required resolution. Your father's business had some temporary setbacks. Dad's face hardens, but his protest lacks the force it once held. You know that construction has been challenging, temporary. My laugh carries no humor. 4 years isn't temporary. 4 years is a pattern. 4 years is a choice. I turn to Sam, whose confusion is morphing into something approaching horror as she begins to understand the scope of the deception. Did you know? Did you know that while you were buying your condo and receiving promotions, I was keeping our parents from losing their house? Sam slowly shakes her head, her perfect composure crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. They told me they were helping you financially, that you were struggling and they were supporting you through difficult times. A bitter laugh escapes me, not the response I expected, but perhaps the one I needed. Is that what they told you? That I was the one receiving help? A daughter supports her family, Mother says tearfully, returning from the kitchen without the promised dessert. Her voice carries that particular quaver reserved for public displays of maternal distress. That's how we raised you. Family comes first, always. Family comes first, I repeat hollowly, the words tasting like poison on my tongue. But I'm not really family, am I? I'm an ATM, the backup plan. The safety net you never acknowledge until you need it, and then immediately forget once you've used it. The realization washes over me with the force of a tsunami, sweeping away the foundations of relationships I thought I understood. All those years of trying to measure up, of accepting less, of making myself smaller to fit into spaces that were never designed to accommodate me. And for what? So they could drain me dry while praising my sister for achievements that my sacrifice helped make possible? Sam sets down her glass with deliberate care, her lawyer's mind clearly working through the implications of what she's discovered. How much, Kylie? Total? I meet her eyes directly, seeing for the first time the sister who might actually be capable of understanding. $84,000. My down payment for a home. My MBA. My future. Father chokes on his wine, the liquid catching in his throat as his face turns an alarming shade of red. But his physical discomfort pales in comparison to the emotional earthquake that's just shattered our family's carefully constructed facade. That's preposterous. He manages finally, but his protest lacks conviction. He knows. They all know now, even if they've spent years convincing themselves that my generosity was obligation rather than sacrifice. The dining room falls silent again, but this time the silence feels different, heavy with truth rather than secrets. Pregnant with possibility rather than suppression. Somewhere beneath the anger and hurt that's threatening to consume me, I feel something else unfurling, a strange, tentative freedom that tastes both terrifying and exhilarating. 3 weeks after the dinner that changed everything, memories flash through my mind like lightning strikes, brilliant, painful, illuminating. The phone call that started it all echoes in my ears as clearly as if it happened yesterday rather than 4 years ago. The ringing began at 11:37 on a Tuesday night in February. I nearly ignored it, already half asleep under my IKEA comforter in my rented one-bedroom apartment. But something, intuition or anxiety, I'll never know which, made me reach for the nightstand. Kylie? Mom's voice cracked on my name, thick with tears that immediately transported me back to childhood moments of comfort and safety. The sound was so raw, so vulnerable that I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake despite the late hour. What's wrong? Is someone hurt? My mind raced through possibilities, car accidents, heart attacks, falls down the stairs. In that moment, I was ready to rush to wherever they needed me, to offer whatever support I could provide. It's the house, she managed between sobs that seemed to tear from her chest. We're going to lose the house. The words didn't make sense initially. Our home, this beautiful colonial on Maple Street that had been in our family for 3 decades, this monument to my parents' success and stability, this symbol of everything they'd built together, was somehow in jeopardy. The next several minutes blurred together as she explained through hiccuping breaths about missed mortgage payments, about father's struggling architectural firm, about the foreclosure notice that had arrived in certified mail that afternoon. Words like 30 days and auction steps punctuated her tears, each syllable a hammer blow to my understanding of my family's financial security. How much? I asked, already reaching for my laptop on the nightstand. my fingers moving instinctively toward the banking app I'd downloaded 6 months earlier. "Just 2,500, she whispered, as if saying it quietly might make it smaller. "Just to stop the foreclosure process while your father sorts things out. Charles swears the Brewster contract is coming through next month." My cursor hovered over the transfer button, my savings account balance glowing harshly in the darkened bedroom. The number represented 3 years of overtime shifts, of brown bag lunches, of choosing the bus over driving to save on gas. My down payment fund for the modest Denver condo I'd been dreaming about since college, the one with exposed brick walls and south-facing windows that would finally make me feel like an adult. "Just this once," Mom promised, relief already washing through her voice. "Your father is mortified that I even called you. We'll pay you back the minute his commission clears, I promise." My finger clicked the mouse. $2,500 vanished from my account like smoke dissipated by wind. The numbers shifted downward with mechanical precision, each digit representing another piece of my independent future disappearing into the void of family obligation. "Thank you, sweetheart," Mom said, her voice clean of tears for the first time since the conversation began. "We raised such a good girl." Father got on the phone briefly, his voice carrying the forced heartiness I'd learned to recognize from childhood disappointments. Promised trips to the zoo canceled due to business emergencies, expensive Christmas gifts that never materialized because the client hasn't paid yet. "Won't happen again." "Kylie Bear," he said, using the nickname he'd given me when I was 5 and still believed his promises. "Just a tough month. Business will pick up soon." I stared at my account balance long after we hung up, the hollowness in my stomach having nothing to do with hunger. "Just this once" became a mantra that would echo through the next 4 years of my life, each repetition a little less true than the one before. 3 weeks later, Mom called again. There had been a mistake with payment processing, she explained, her voice carrying a different note now, less desperate, more expectant. "Just $1,200 this time, enough to cover the gap until Father's business recovered." I transferred the money without hesitation, already establishing a pattern I wouldn't recognize until much later. A month passed uneventfully, giving me false hope that perhaps their crisis had indeed been temporary. Then came the call about Father's late-paying client and the assurance that business would bounce back any day now. Another transfer. Another promise. Another piece of my future sacrificed on the altar of family obligation. By the 6th month, I'd stopped waiting for the explanations to change. I'd stopped expecting repayment that would never materialize. I set up an automatic transfer, $1,500 monthly, directly to their mortgage company. It was easier than the tearful phone calls, the desperate pleas, the promises that tasted like lies even as they were spoken. My email notification pinged on a Wednesday afternoon at work. A downtown Denver condo development was offering pre-sale opportunities, walking distance to my office in my price range, available with just 10% down. The units would sell out in 48 hours, the message warned. Time was of the essence. I checked my savings account after 6 months of transfers. I was back where I'd started 3 years earlier, my financial progress erased as thoroughly as my presence at family celebrations. I deferred my MBA program acceptance for the second time, citing financial circumstances on the deferral form. The university would hold my spot for 1 more year, they told me gently. After that, I'd need to reapply and compete against a new pool of candidates. I created a spreadsheet to track the damage, not just the financial cost, but the compound interest lost, the career advancement delayed, the retirement contributions missed, the life experiences postponed indefinitely. The final sum made my hands shake with a mixture of anger and disbelief that would take years to fully process. Just this once became every month. 6 months became a year. A year became 2, then 3, then 4. Each transfer felt like a small death. Each promise broken like a tiny betrayal that accumulated into something massive and suffocating. On my lunch break, I microwaved ramen noodles in the office kitchen while scrolling through Instagram. A photo appeared. Mom at Marcello's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown, captioned "Anniversary Dinner." Blessed with a champagne emoji. In the background of another photo the following week, Father's new golf clubs leaned against the dining room wall with the casual elegance of things that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. The MBA program called again, I mentioned during Easter dinner, testing the waters of their awareness. They're wondering if I'll be starting this fall. Your sister always had such a good head for business, Mom replied, passing the mashed potatoes without meeting my eyes. That's why she's so successful at the firm. Financial responsibility is a sign of maturity, I nodded, swallowing both the irony and the instant potatoes that tasted like sawdust and surrender. At the office holiday party, Jessica from accounting slid into the chair beside me, her presence a relief from the forced cheer of colleagues discussing bonuses and vacation plans. You okay? She asked, her eyes kind behind tortoiseshell glasses that gave her a scholarly appearance belying her sharp wit. You've been brown bagging it for months now, even during the holiday season when everyone orders catering. Just saving, I said, the lie automatic by now. Spoken so many times it felt like truth even as I knew it was poison. She studied me over her glass of cheap Chardonnay, the silence stretching between us until it became uncomfortable. For what exactly? She asked finally. Because you never actually seem to buy anything. No new clothes, no vacations, no car upgrades. You don't even order coffee from the fancy machine in the break room. Something in her direct gaze broke through my carefully constructed defenses. Over after-work coffee that turned into dinner at a cozy bistro I'd never been able to afford. The entire story spilled out in a torrent of words I'd never spoken aloud. 4 years, $84,000. The endless cycle of obligation and erasure that had become my life. Jessica set down her mug with a decisive click against the ceramic table. Kylie, you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, she said simply. Even if those people are your family. Especially if those people are your family. They're my parents, I whispered. But the words lacked conviction even as I spoke them. And you're their daughter. Not their bank, she replied, her voice firm with the kind of certainty I hadn't felt in years. Do you think Sam would do this for them? Do you think they would ask her to? The question hung in the air between us, its answer obvious and devastating. Jessica pulled a napkin toward her, uncapped a pen, and began doing math that revealed not just the financial cost of my choices, but the compound interest lost, the career advancement delayed, the life I was missing while supporting a lifestyle I wasn't living. That money represents your future, she said gently, pushing the calculations across the table. And they've stolen it piece by piece while convincing you it was your choice to give it away. That night, I stared at my bank app until the numbers blurred together, thumb hovering over the cancel button for the automatic transfer that had become the defining feature of my financial life. 4 years of monthly payments. 4 years of postponing my own dreams. 4 years of believing I was being helpful when I was actually being systematically erased. The next morning, I made an appointment with a financial advisor who specialized in family dynamics. Martha's office smelled like leather and lemon polish, her gray hair pulled into a severe bun that suggested she'd seen every possible permutation of financial dysfunction and remained unimpressed by all of, them. $84,000 over 4 years, she said, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed my statements. And they've never disclosed this to your sister or acknowledged it publicly? No, I answered, the word feeling heavy with 4 years of accumulated shame and secrecy. And you had no legal obligation to pay their mortgage? None whatsoever. Then what you've experienced is financial exploitation, she said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who named things for a living. Family exploitation is still exploitation. Kylie. The relationship doesn't excuse the behavior, it actually makes it more insidious because it's harder to recognize and even harder to escape. Hearing someone in authority name my experience sent a shiver down my spine that felt like the first honest emotion I'd allowed myself in years. I'd been exploited, not helped, not supported, not even temporarily assisted. My family had systematically drained my resources while maintaining the illusion of parental support and guidance. Let's create a personal budget, Martha continued, pulling out fresh spreadsheets that would chart a course back to financial independence, one that prioritizes your future instead of sacrificing it on the altar of family obligation. When she showed me projections of where I could be in 5 years without the monthly drain of my parents' mortgage, tears sprang to my eyes. College funds for future children that might actually exist if I ever had the financial stability to consider starting a family. Retirement contributions that would compound into actual security instead of the anxiety that had become my constant companion. A down payment fund that would grow instead of dwindling each month until it disappeared entirely. This is what financial health looks like, Martha said gently. though her words felt like both liberation and indictment. This is what self-respect feels like in numerical form. The next morning, I opened my first investment account with the $1,400 I would have transferred to my parents' mortgage company. The act felt like planting a flag on distant territory I was claiming as my own. This money is mine. This future is mine. This life belongs to me alone. That afternoon, I called the university admissions office and accepted my place in the graduate program I'd deferred for 7 consecutive semesters. "Welcome back, Miss Anderson," the admissions counselor said warmly. "We've held your spot just as we promised. We're excited to have you join our cohort." 3 weeks passed in a blur of change and confrontation. The phone calls from extended family began within days of the canceled transfer, each one a variation on the theme of family obligation and personal responsibility. My Aunt Gloria called first, her voice carrying the weight of family disapproval that had been wielded against multiple generations of Anderson women who stepped out of line. "Your father asked me to reach out," she began, her tone suggesting she was already exhausted by the conversation she was required to have. "He's very concerned about your recent decisions. He says you're having some kind of breakdown?" "Actually, I'm having a breakthrough," I replied, though the words felt foreign in my mouth. "But thank you for calling to check on me." "I just think you should consider what you're giving up here," she continued, ignoring my correction. "Family is everything, Kylie. When you lose your family, you lose your foundation." "I'm not losing my family," I said carefully. "I'm just no longer funding their lifestyle. There's a significant difference." The conversation ended politely but firmly, with both of us understanding that we stood on opposite sides of a generational divide that would never be bridged by logic or compassion. My parents' generation believed that children existed to support their parents' dreams, while my generation was beginning to understand that healthy relationships required mutual respect and boundaries that protected everyone's well-being. My cousin Marcus called next, his voice hesitant and apologetic. "They asked me to talk some sense into you," he admitted. "But honestly, I think what you're doing is pretty badass. My mom has been giving them money for years too, though not as much as you were. I don't think any of us realized how much you were actually contributing." The family mobilization was impressive in its coordination and scope. Within a week, I'd heard from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, each carrying the same message wrapped in different packaging. Family comes first. Daughters support their parents. Good girls don't abandon their family responsibilities. "They're good at this," Jessica observed over coffee at the shop across from our office. "I've got to hand it to them. They've got the flying monkeys out in full force." "Flying monkeys?" I asked, stirring my latte with more force than necessary. "From the Wizard of Oz," she explained. "The Wicked Witch sends them to do her dirty work when she can't accomplish something herself. It's a classic manipulation tactic. When the direct approach fails, enlist others to apply pressure from multiple angles." I'd known Jessica for 3 years, working in adjacent departments and sharing occasional lunches. But in this moment, she felt like the first person who had ever truly seen me. Over the following weeks, she helped me craft responses to family communications, practicing scripts that maintained my boundaries without unnecessarily escalating conflicts. I made an appointment with a financial therapist. I told her one afternoon as autumn leaves began to turn the city into a canvas of gold and amber. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "That's a huge step toward healing." The financial therapist's office felt like a different world from Martha's practical space, more like a living room than an office, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting that encouraged the kind of emotional excavation I'd been avoiding for years. Family financial abuse often goes unrecognized because it wears the mask of love and obligation, Dr. Martinez explained, her gentle voice carrying the authority of someone who had guided countless clients through similar journeys. The people who should be protecting you are instead exploiting you, which creates a particularly damaging form of cognitive dissonance. You end up questioning your own reality because it conflicts so dramatically with what you've been taught to expect from family relationships. Over the next several months, I learned to name what had happened to me, to recognize the patterns of manipulation and control that had been disguised as parental love. The therapy was sometimes more painful than the original wounds, forcing me to confront truths I'd spent years avoiding through busyness and self-sacrifice. But gradually, the work began to heal something fundamental in me. I learned to set boundaries without guilt, to recognize the difference between helping and enabling, to understand that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just use disguised as affection. 6 months after that explosive dinner, I stood at the panoramic window of my new Seattle condominium, watching dawn paint Mount Rainier in hues of amber and rose. 14 floors above the city, I'd built a life where I mattered, where my voice carried weight, where my choices served my own well-being rather than everyone else's. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop, another text from Mom about how they were managing without my monthly support. I ignored it, sipping coffee that cost more than I would have allowed myself 6 months earlier. Small luxuries no longer triggered guilt or anxiety about whether I deserved them.